Hello friends, it's Mal with Made by Manny and Mal. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming at you with another manicure inspired Tumbler tutorial. I did one of these a long time ago and I am back at it again. I found another manicure that really inspired me and I wanted to turn it into a tumbler. So this is the photo that we are going to be using as our inspiration for this cup. It is a monochromatic manicure, but each finger has a different texture, a different pattern, and it's really kind of fun and funky. So I wanted to bring that vibe to a cup. So we're gonna be making a striped cup and each stripe is gonna have something different going on. I really love how this turned out and I hope you enjoy the video. And I also hope that you are inspired by this design and you create something totally awesome using this technique. I wanna see what you come up with, so please be sure to tag me in your photos at Made by Manny and Mal on Facebook and Instagram. Everything I use in this video will be linked in the description box below, so be sure to check that out. I got you covered and all of our social media is also linked there as well. All right, I think that's all. Let's go. We are starting off with a fully prepped and sanded cup. This is a 24-ounce Plump from the steel Magnolia. I prepped it like normal and then I did a coat of satin white spray paint from Rustoleum. We're going to map out our stripes using this painter's tape. This is about 1 inch wide. The 24-ounce Plump is about-ish 8 inches high. So we're going to do 8 different stripes and then the bottom stripe will be just a little bit longer than all of the other ones. So I'm starting at the very top and I'm getting my tape as close to the rim as possible. I'm trying not to go over the rim just so we can map out our stripes and make sure that they all end up being the same size. I'm going really slow here, just trying to make sure I get it right because this stripe is going to determine the layout of all the other stripes. So once I've got that one down, I'm just going to repeat the process, going all the way down the cup, trying to get my tape as close to that bottom edge of the previous piece of tape to make sure that our stripes are even and that they're not overlapping or anything weird like that. Once we get to the bottom, you'll see I've got a little bit extra there, but that's fine. We're gonna glitter the bottom anyway, and that's gonna be like one big chunk altogether. So don't worry about that. If you want everything to be even, you can just maybe leave a little bit more space in between your pieces of tape or use painter's tape that's a little bit wider than this 1 inch tape. Once I've got my stripes mapped out, I'm going to remove all of this tape so we can base paint it. There are a couple stripes that are not going to be base painted the peach color that we're using. So I wanted to map out my stripes first so I could make sure that those were placed and in the correct spot. So this really is kind of a waste of tape. I would recommend saving these pieces that you used for your stripes because we are going to put them back on later. So I would keep them. I didn't, I just wasn't thinking, but these 2 stripes are going to stay white and then the rest of them we're going to paint Apricot from Montana Colors. So I'm going to paint it, woohoo, magic. And once the paint dried, I took my blue tape again and mapped out my stripes one more time. So this is where I would recommend using your old pieces of tape because they're already sized and ready to go. And once I've got my stripes mapped out, again, I'm going to remove that top piece to expose our top white stripe. And then I'm just going to tape off the rest. So we're going to glitter this white portion and then our bottom portion. So I'm using the epoxy method and I'm taking the tiniest bit of epoxy that I can and I'm just going to spread it on this white stripe and then I'll do the same on the bottom and just make sure to keep this really thin. For that top white stripe, I'm using Chantilly from Peachy Olive Glitters. I would recommend using fine glitters for this. It's just gonna make your life a lot easier. You're not gonna have to pat anything down or do a whole lot of sanding. So pretty much every single glitter I'm using is a finer cut. For our orange part at the bottom, I'm going to layer Sweet Georgia Peach and Fuzzy Navel, both from Peachy Olive Glitters. I'm pretty sure these are the same color, just 2 different cuts. So first I'm taking Sweet Georgia Peach and I'm doing the entire bottom stripe along with the bottom of the cup. And then I'm going to take Fuzzy Navel and just directly layer that right on top. This is going to fill in any gaps we might have and just add a little bit more coverage to that bottom portion. Right after we're done glittering, we're going to remove the tape that borders those glittered portions. We don't want the epoxy to cure and give us problems later when we try to remove that tape. So I'm just going to remove the tape that borders the glitter. We don't have to worry about removing the tape that's in the middle just yet. Once that epoxy dried, I let it sit about 6 hours. We are going to move on to that next white stripe and then the top orange stripe underneath our white. So for that top orange stripe, I'm going to mix together Dreamsicle and Grace, both from PDB. Dreamsicle is a really bright, kind of peachy orange color, and Grace is a light pink. So I wanted to kind of tone down Dreamsicle a little bit, make it a little bit more pink, so that's why I'm adding in the Grace. Once I've got those two mixed together, I'm going to take Extravaganza, also from PDB, and just do a little sprinkle in there. This is, I think, the only chunky color that I used, and I just did a tiny little bit. It's got a lot of dimension and really pretty shapes in there, so I wanted to add that in as well. For the white stripe, we're going to mix together Candelabra and Pearl, also from PDB. Pearl is kind of a matte glitter. It's not totally matte, but a little more pearlescent, pearl. And Candelabra is a color I like to mix into everything. So I'm going in with the epoxy method again, and I'm being really, really careful when I apply this epoxy. I don't want to get it onto the spots we've already glittered because I don't want the colors to mix together. So just be careful when you apply your epoxy for this layer. If you didn't want to do the epoxy method, you could use double-sided tape if you wanted to for these portions, or you could use Mod Podge or any other adhesive that you have. You don't have to do the epoxy method. We're going to remove those pieces of tape that border the glittered sections, just how we did with the first two sections. And I'm going to let this sit and dry just about 6 to 8 hours. And once it was dry, I sealed the glitter with Rustoleum 2 times semi-gloss clear. I would normally use gloss, but I didn't have any, so I'm using semi-gloss and it works totally fine. Once the spray paint dried, I was ready to move on to the next step. We're going to be adding some patterned stripes using printable vinyl. I got these digital paper designs from Creative Fabrica and Etsy. There are 2 ways that you can create your stripes. So the first one is to go into Silhouette Studio. You can also do this with Cricut Design Space. You would just go and create a shape. So you're going to create your rectangle and then keep the aspect ratio unlocked. And we're going to put in the dimensions of our stripe. So 9.55 inches wide by 1.024 inches high. So there's the size of our stripe. And I'm going to take my paper, so whatever paper you want to use. If you are doing the Silhouette Studio version, I would recommend using an image you don't want to tile. So for example, I use this stripe image for my cup, and I'm just going to drag it into that box, and it will fill that box with the pattern paper that I've got. If you wanted to tile your image or you want to change the size, you can go into Canva, and what you'll do is create a new project, doesn't matter the size, and then we're going to go up to resize. We're going to make it custom, make sure we're on inches, and we're going to put in the same dimensions, 9.55 by 1.024, resize it, and then we've got our stripe size. Then I'm going to go into uploads, just add this paper that I've got here. And what I like to do is size it, and then I will duplicate it a few times. And then once I've got a few, I will highlight them all, group them together, and then make them fit just like that. So now I've got a bigger print and my stripe is ready to go, so I can just download this as a PNG or a JPEG, whatever, print it out on my printable vinyl, and then cut it out and apply it to my cup. I'm going to cut out these stripes just using my paper cutter. You could totally use your print and cut if you wanted to, or cut them out by hand. This was just the quickest and easiest way for me to do it and make sure that I was able to get the stripes the size I wanted to. So now that I've got my stripes all cut out, I'm going to start to map them out on my Tumbler and decide where I want each stripe to go. So On some of these glittered sections, we're going to do water slide, we're going to do vinyl on the other. So I want the patterns to make sense. So I'm going to lay out my stripes and make sure that I'm not going to have too much of one vibe in one area, if that makes sense. So just going to take these and map them out before we apply to make sure that they're exactly where I want them to go. I'm applying this vinyl similarly to how I would apply like a full vinyl wrap. So I'm starting off with the backing on and just peeling a little piece of that backing off. And then once I had a pretty good idea of where the vinyl was going to lay, I pulled off the rest of the backing, pulled it kind of taut, and then made sure that it laid down flat without any ripples or bubbles or anything like that. So for this top stripe, I did the exact same process that I would with a regular vinyl wrap. I trimmed off the excess at the top, and then I moved on to my next stripe. So as you can see here, I'm pulling back just a little bit of the backing so I can anchor down my vinyl, and then I'm going to use my thumb to push it down and slowly remove that backing as I stick the stripe onto the cup. Once I get to the end and the vinyl is off the backing, I pull up that seam and just make sure that everything is laying down straight and that I can meet those seams up as well as possible. I don't want the seams to be too obvious, so I tried to lay them down as straight as I could. And then I just repeated that exact same process for the next two stripes. Here's what the cup looks like with all the vinyl stripes on. So I'm ready to now seal this. I wanted to do another coat of clear spray just to make sure that we didn't get any glitter migrating up into those vinyl areas. So once that paint dried, I just did one coat. I did my first coat of epoxy. I used 25 milliliters of a little extra epoxy, and I worked my way up the cup in horizontal motions. I didn't want to go up and down the cup vertically as I applied the epoxy because I didn't want to risk spreading that glitter. Even though we sealed it, I wanted to be on the safe side. I did 2 coats of epoxy, and then I did all my sanding. This didn't really need too much sanding because we did use fine glitter, so remember, makes your life a lot easier. So now we're ready for our first set of decals. I thought it would be really cute to just put a really simple "Be Happy" quote at the very bottom. This is in a kind of fun retro-y font, which is the entire vibe of this cup. So I put that on the bottom, and then for the top white stripe, we're doing a layered leopard print. So for the bottom, I cut coral, and then the top I cut out of black, and then I just layered the entire SVG or big square of leopard spots at one time, and then just cut out little bunches as I went. Tried to lay the spots down one by one and make sure that they were evenly distributed around that entire stripe. Once we've got our vinyl work on our cup, we're going to seal it with a really thin coat of epoxy. The next 2 stripes we're going to do water slide on, so I want them to be shiny and smooth and ready for that. So just did about 15 milliliters of epoxy on that coat, and once it was cured, I moved on to my next step. So we're going to take care of the bottom before we move on to our water slide. I just took another one of the digital papers that I have, and I cut out a 2.5 inch circle on my silhouette. I just printed out the pattern and then used it like a regular printed vinyl sheet. So that inner circle of the 24-ounce Plump from the Steel Magnolia is about 2.5 inches wide, and it fit perfectly in there just like a glove. So now we're going to move on to our water slide stripes. I've got 2 little patterns here that we're going to put on. I've got my stars, which are going to go up on that orange stripe, and then the leaves are going to go on our white stripe. So I've sealed these already with 3 coats of Rustoleum clear spray, and then I'm going to cut them out and put them in my water so we can get them on this cup. You want to make sure when you're getting your cup wet for your water slides that you don't get that bottom printable vinyl image wet, because the water will show through that. So just be careful as you are applying your water slides and getting your cup wet. If you want to wait till the very end to apply the vinyl to the bottom of your cup, you can totally do that too. I just figured I would do them all at the same time. So for our first water slide stripe, we're going to apply as we normally would. We're going to keep the backing on as long as possible and just slide that image off and make sure that we've got our stripe as straight as we can get it. And then I'm going to take my wet paper towel, smooth out any air bubbles or water pockets, make sure that my image is positioned exactly where I want it to be. And then I'll take my dry paper towel and just dab out as much water as I can. I'm not looking for total dryness here, just want to make sure I get it dry enough so that it won't move around as we apply the next water slide. We're going to repeat that exact same process for the top orange stripe with the stars. And once I've got that applied, I'm going to let this sit and dry overnight, at least a full 12 hours before I apply epoxy. I don't seal this with anything before I go in with epoxy, just make sure it's totally dry. I'm applying 20 milliliters of a little extra epoxy to seal this water slide in. I'm using the same horizontal motions that I used when I did my first coats, just to make sure that nothing moves around. Those water slides should be totally dry, but better safe than sorry. I let that coat cure a full 12 hours before I applied my stripes within my stripes. I cut these out at 11.5 inches long by 0.1 inches high, so these are really thin, and I cut them out using Sunset Pink Chrome from Tech Wrap Craft. It's a really pretty, like, pink, orange, yellow, kind of opal-y vinyl, which I thought went perfectly with this cup. So I'm just taking one stripe at a time, pulling it off the backing completely, and then applying it with the assistance of my little cup holder here to keep my cup straight. Just keeping the stripe as straight as possible and then moving my cup to meet around to make sure that this stays straight and that the edges will meet up at the back. I'm also keeping all of my seams in one place, making sure that they all meet up with the seams of our printable vinyl. Sometimes when I'm laying these stripes down, I have a tendency to put that edge down not as straight as I could, so it kind of like tilts upwards or tilts downwards. So once I've got the other end ready to come around and meet it, I have to lift up that inside part. So I'll show you right now, I'll zoom you in. I lift up that part that I laid down initially, pull it back, and then I let the other end come down and kind of close that circle. And then I will bring that first piece over and around, and then I'll trim off that excess part that we ended up pulling up. This helps me kind of keep everything straight, make sure everything lines up perfectly, and that's why I always cut my stripes longer than I need so that I have plenty of room to work with. I'm just going to apply the stripes all the way down to the bottom of my cup, and once they're all on there, we are going to put it right on the turner and seal in this vinyl with a coat of Quick Coat from Counterculture. This is going to prevent our vinyl from lifting, especially where the two seams of the stripes meet up at the back of our cup. A little bit of this goes a long way, so just a really thin coat, let that dry about 45 minutes, and then I went in with my final coat of epoxy. I took 25 milliliters of a little extra epoxy, and that was all we needed to finish this baby up. I absolutely love how this design turned out. I loved picking all my patterns, putting them all together, and just making a cup that was really upbeat, happy, and fun. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for new videos every Tuesday and Saturday, and let me know what you think in the comments. If you make your own monochromatic Manny-inspired tumblers, please be sure to tag me in your photos at madebymaniandmal. I would love to see what you create. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in our next one. Love you. Bye.